Hello everybody, this is Hero back with another midnight video. In this video we're taking a look at Dominate Mind. I'm going to walk you through all of the Mythic Plus dungeons for Season 1 as well as the other midnight dungeons, the new ones, and talk to you about the various mobs that we can MC. Mythic Plus is an interesting environment for using MC because not only can you get a bit of damage from the healer role by picking certain mobs and carrying them with you all the way along the dungeon, but also quite a few of them have some interesting CC opportunities, and in general, using Dominate Mind actually can interrupt some of the major casts that are going off in each of the dungeons. So I'll just kind of go through the list, starting with all the ones that are going to become Mythic Plus dungeons, and then covering the last ones at the end. So here at the beginning, we have a few pulls here with Magisters, the first one being the Mage. You can see here the Mage has two abilities. One's just the sort of damage ability, an Arcane Burst, but this Mage also has Polymorph, which is I think it's a 4-second cast, something like that. The salient point is that you can use this on various mobs, and the polymorph damage doesn't break as with a normal character. So what you can do is you can untoggle the auto cast. Yeah, there it is, a 3.5-second cast. And then you can keybind this. This is available in the keybinds options under pets. And you can, make it whatever you like. That slot is usually the one that most of the special abilities are on. And then at the opportune time, when you're coming into a new pack with your mage, you just get it to cast on a high priority target that's maybe a cast or something like that. And the polymorph will go off and you can damage it just like normal and it won't really break. So it's quite wonderful. Next we have the Enforcer. The Enforcer is interesting because it has a pretty good damage profile. It has an ability called Arcane Blade, which does a lot of extra damage adding on to its attacks. And I don't know if I show it in this clip, but there's another clip a little bit later in the dungeon where I'm doing damage with it, but you can see it's doing somewhat interesting amounts of damage for us here. Again, their damage is going to scale with key, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily worth always doing this in a Mythic Plus. You have to be able to handle using your mobs, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the video, just general tips. But overall, just wanted to show you that is another option instead of the mage if you just want raw damage. Third one, a little bit later in the dungeon, after the mobs die, you get through a second part and you can grab a Hollow Soul Shredder as you head back up this tunnel. The Hollow Soul Shredder is again just a DPS monster, really. It's just going to do a lot of physical damage to the mobs. It doesn't have a special ability that I'm aware of, although you could get these Void Lords as well. The Shredder I found was just more DPS overall, so just another mob you can pick up after you kill the boss and keep going and adding damage for your team. You can see here it's probably doing like 1% overall for the dungeon, but it's certainly adding to my total in general on the meters. Yeah. Let's move over to Maisara Caverns. So Maisara has two mobs that you can grab right at the beginning. Actually, there's some behind you, and I'll show you why you should get it. Not the Headhunter, which I just grabbed, but the Berserker. But in either case, these are right at the beginning of the dungeon, and you can carry these through all the way. That's one of the themes, I think, of this video is here's mobs that you can grab almost immediately and use right away. I think the Headhunter is worse because its ability is a ranged ability, so if it ever takes aggro, which it shouldn't in Mythic Plus, but it can be a problem for it actually using that ability. Right next to it, though, is the Berserker, and you can grab one of these actually behind me as you walk in, and the Berserker is one of the better mobs, I think, in the entire game because it has a sort of personal bloodlust. You can see their Blood Frenzy, which is amping its damage by 20% and giving a 30% auto attack. It's by far, except for one other mob that I'll show you later, by far the best choice for just raw DPS of all the mobs that I found in any of the new dungeons or the Mythic Plus dungeons. Except I did not get a chance to do any testing in the Seat of the Triumvirate dungeon because it's a little bit bugged, which is in Argus, so you can't actually get into that dungeon. I would have had to test that during Mythic Plus, but you can see the Frenzied Berserker does a lot of damage in general and has that amp. This is the one I would suggest grabbing in Maisara Caverns. All right, let's head over. There's just the other ones to talk about is the Eagle, which has a bit of a swipe, which does a kind of poison type damage. And I think I show this on the meters, but this is just a little bit further down the hill. Though again, if it was a choice between the Eagle and the Berserker, I'd say take the Berserker, but just in case something gets killed, you can also grab one of these Eagles and take them along for the ride. I think I show it here. You can see it has a little bit of a poison cleave claw damage or something. Okay, on to Nexus-Point. This is one of my favorites, the Core Right Arcanist. You can grab this either in the middle or on the left, depending on the route that your group takes. But in either case, this has two abilities. One's Transference, which is going to imbue the target with kind of a healing reduction. So it's actually nice to grab this mob anyways. But the main ability actually is this giant AoE Arcane Pulse, which is probably the highest AoE DPS mob that I've seen in the whole game. So this one, you can see it pulsing there. It just goes boom, boom, boom. Again, you can untoggle the auto cast. It has a huge AoE, by the way. I know the area looks small there, but Arcane Explosion will drag mobs into it, so just be aware. But if you can imagine, you head down this tunnel on the left side, that you can grab one of these guys en route to doing a big pull with your team, untoggle the auto cast of this, he'll walk into melee and start meleeing, and then once everything is grouped up, you get him to do that long cast, and the AoE damage is really substantial. So we'll see how that scales with Mythic Plus and your needs. There are some difficulties with taking this mob, but the upside actually is that this mob won't be casting that spell, which is basically a deadly spell that needs to be kicked. So if you're holding on to this mob, you are helping your team by essentially always grabbing that kick, since you're always mind controlling the mob. There's also another one, an Engineer, that is worth grabbing too. He's similar to the Arcanist in that he has an ability that can scale with targets. It's a little bit different. It's the suppression field, so it puts a small ring, you can see it there, around the target. Again, if you have pinpoint stacked your pull and you just auto click that off so that you can use it on demand, that ability will do a ton of damage to a whole bunch of mobs. But just remember to make sure he doesn't auto cast it and then use it at the right time. You can see here I'm just in a follower dungeon trying to get these done. But if you group these up and then at the right time decide to cast it, if they were actually grouped properly, you can see how you could make use of this in AoE. So the Engineer is also an interesting option. And then finally, the third one is, let me just see here, a little further along in Nexus-Point, on the other side. Excuse me. I want to get to the far side to talk about the other mobs, but I think I've misplaced it. Yes, I have. Nope, I don't have anything anywhere else. Let me just grab it really quick. The third one is the Grand Nullifier on the other side of the wing. And this one's interesting because it has two abilities. Basically a casted nuke in the AoE. And you just see it going off there for the enemy one. But it also has a sort of stun or a fear, Dusk Frights. And Dusk Frights is interesting because its a 5-second fear or immobilize. And that's a long time on enemy mobs. And just like with the engineer or the core right, you can pull this guy into a big pull. You can auto toggle it off like I've done. Get your pull together tightly stacked, and then you get a giant CC. And that's pretty significant for Mythic Plus when you think about the sort of stuff that you can pull off. Notice how when I recasted him, he will have his stuff auto-toggled on, so just be aware of that. But there goes the big nuke, and I'm going to try casting my guy's version of that little pool. You can see the pool goes off there, and it stunned the other guy. So some of them are immune to it, the Null Sentinel is, but a lot of these mobs are not, especially the ones that have high auto attack. There's one with a bleed, I believe, up ahead. And these ones are pretty strong. Let me just see if I can get it here. Yeah, the Scroungers, see how it's stunned them there? It's a full 5-second stun on these mobs, which is amazing because they can take damage during it. So just be aware of the Grand Nullifier. Pretty solid. Okay, let's head over to Windrunner Spire. Windrunner Spire is interesting because there's a lot of undead spirit guys at the beginning that you can't use. But after the first couple pulls, you get down here and there's one creature you can grab, the Territorial Dragonhawk. And this Dragonhawk can be used for the rest of the dungeon, actually. You can take it all the way along. And it's got a couple of abilities that are interesting, but it also just does a lot of damage. So this is one I would suggest grabbing, just in part for the ability it has. It amps itself up there, and it'll autocast that and do significant damage. So the Dragonhawk is quite solid. I think you can see I just keep re-CCing it. You can take it into this boss fight, and off it goes. I just grab it again, and you keep going down after that boss fight into the next section. Here we're down into the twins, and the Dragonhawk is here. Sometimes it can bug out after the twins when you're going back up, but just make sure you re-CC it before you take the portal, and like sometimes you get stuck in combat. But you can grab it all the way down, and Krolok as well. You can keep it even to the final boss. So it'll transport with you. Good damage overall. Dragonhawk is a good pickup. Algeth'ar is returning, and there's a few you can grab here, including the Mana Fiends. You can also grab some of the books and the worms, but this guy here I think is probably the best one because of Mana Void, which again does pretty good damage. It's an AoE spell. You can't really test it as easily here because everything dies to one hit, but just so you're aware, Mana Void is one of those special abilities that's going to scale with targets. The second one is there's a little, if you go up the stairs to the right, you can grab one of these bugs. This bug has just got high DPS and a poison. You can see here, all you have to do is grab one of those 3 bugs early before you do the pull. They always come up to the stairs, so you'll grab those before your tank does the big lasher gather, and then you can hold it for the rest of the fight and even into single fart. You can see it has Darting Sting, which is a kind of poison damage effect, so probably another good mob to get if you don't go to the left. One thing to note about Algeth'ars is you cannot use the air bridges to go between the areas if you have a mob MC'd. So you will go and walk right off the edge and die. You have to have dismiss each mob, so these can only really be used for this downstairs section. Most of the time people go one direction and then go over the bridge, so it's kind of a one-use target. That's why I suggest looking at the Mana Fiend as well. But this guy, if you're coming back to this platform later, you can grab him before you go up to the boss. Algeth'ar's also has the third or final part before you go to the dragon, and you can MC one of the mobs there. Not the soldier ones, but I think the caster mob can be MC'd. and it has a pretty big damage amp, I think, as well. I think you're going to see me run out right off the edge with the skitterfly, just so you can see what I'm talking about. Or maybe I'd take him into the boss. I can't remember. Every time you MC, it puts you in combat for about 6 seconds. So just be advised, if you're doing this out of combat and you need to get on your mount, it'll take about 6 seconds of time. And here we go, trying to jump off, and because I have the mob MC'd, you can't do it. Yeah, so check for that lizard guy. It's one of the mages, I believe, not the warriors, but you can take that one right into the boss as well. Skyreach is also returning, and the one mob to look at is the driving Gale Caller. You can also grab the Blade Talon, I believe. Not the Blade Talon, but it's one of the other melee guys in here in this first section. But the Gale Caller is a good CC because it has the repel ability, which will blast you all over the place. So it's helping your team by grabbing it. And also you can cast it on opposing mobs, so you can displace them. You see it right here. Boom. So if there's a cast going off later, it will knock them out of the way. Like that one there from the Blade Talon, these things get interrupted. There is a bug, I think, when you're holding this guy into the second boss, the Talon boss that floats. Sometimes it won't let you progress and the boss won't come down, so just be advised that you might need to get rid of this after the second boss, before the third boss, but you can take him down into the next boss. The other mobs you could grab too, there's a few more that you can grab before the second boss. You just have to kill the constructs to make him active. So you can, there's like the warriors you could take, for example, all fine as DPS, but they don't have any special abilities. So I just wanted to note that. Yeah, the other ones to note, Seed of the Triumvirate, I can't test for you right now, but I believe these three, Bound Voidcaller, Dark Conjurer, and Ruthless Riftstalker, all can be MC'd and used. And then Pit of Saron, there are no mobs. I went and tested every single mob in the whole dungeon, and none of them can be MC'd. So Pit of Saron in Mythic Plus really will not apply for this strategy. Now moving on to the other dungeons that we're going to be taking a look at later outside of Season 1, Blinding Vale has a couple of interesting options, one of which is the Petal Wing here. And the Petal Wing is cool because it has a giant AoE interrupt. That Screech will do a lot of damage, but also it doesn't immobilize, so it's kind of interesting to grab that. There's a few others you can MC in this dungeon as well, but that one's the most interesting as far as an extra ability is concerned. Be advised, it does kind of pull from a ways away, so watch yourself. Den of Nalarakk has a couple of good options. The main one being the Keen-Eyed Screecher and the Bear in the early parts. The Bear is insane damage and does a amp on target, so they receive more. And the Screecher has an interrupt. See, this one's going to go off. This is good to grab just because it will silence your teammates, which is really frustrating for any ranged comps, warlocks, mages, these kinds of things. Any casters like the dragons. But it also does a lot of damage in AoE, so you can, again, toggle it off and then use it at your own discretion for a big pull. But you can see here I'm doing something crazy like 40k, partly because of this Screecher. But the Bear is even more impressive, so look out for the Bear. There's quite a few you can grab, and you can take them through all the way to the boss. You can get some of the Ragers too. If you lose these mobs right before the ice boss, there's one that's hanging out alone, so you won't pull anything else as you come over the crest in Den of Nalarakk and down to the winter boss, just on the right of your path. So if you are looking for another mob to grab, that's a good one. This is a good dungeon for reminding you that in general, one of the benefits of using Dominate Mind is because you get to contribute CC that basically healers, there goes the silence, don't have. So as long as you're managing your mob, if you come in and CC the one right away, you're just removing one of those deadly mobs from the encounter, so your team doesn't have to worry about a kick. but that'll be Season 2, so we don't need to worry about that so much right now. Murder Row, likewise, has a few. The Row Hooligan right at the beginning, as well as one of the mages at the beginning, are good targets. This guy's got a bleed, which is pretty nasty, actually. And bleeds are a hard thing to deal with as a healer because we can't dispel them typically without using a long cooldown. So it's worth grabbing and getting rid of these cut purses. But the mages also do a lot of damage, so that's another option right off the bat that you can take through the whole dungeon. This includes, by the way, even the area where you do the little dance and feed the people and do all that. You can have the CC'd mob come with you through that section, even if you don't. You can get your disguise and go up the stairs, and they'll follow you, and then you can MC them in the middle of your dance while you're feeding people or sweeping up or whatever role you have, and you'll keep it through to the next section. Murder Row has some other options later on, but that one, just so you can right away, you can grab and go. Finally, Voidscar Arena has a couple of good options to look at, but the best one by a long shot is this dominated brawler who has his own blood surge, which causes enemies to take increased damage, and it increases the thing's attack speed. So kind of like the Berserker and Maisara, this is another high quality DPS unit to grab, and I think it's like the Berserker, probably the highest DPS in the whole field. Of course, it's not going to be in Season 1, so we'll see it a little bit later, but I think this is the best one I could find, and there's quite a few interesting mobs as you go through this dungeon that you can also grab, but it doesn't really offer anything else except for its own steroid, but it's a lot of damage, as you can see. So yeah, just to note some of the practicalities about using Dominate Mind. One of the big ones is just your spacing relative to the mob, because it gives a special aggro table that can't really be dealt with easily by your tank. They can CC it and taunt it off and that sort of thing, but you need to be prepared to watch where the mob is. So typically what I've done here is to set up my UI so that I can see the mob, and in particular I can see Dominate Mind ticking down. There's probably some ways to do this with other add-ons that you have as part of your kit, but I haven't found a very useful one as of yet with something like Grid 2 or others to track these things. So just be advised that that's my strategy, is having the pet bar in a really reasonable spot so that you can see it, hotkeying those pet bar ads, I'll show you in a second, and then making sure you can track and you're just glancing over to see where the debuff is wearing off the mob. In terms of talents, that's why I suggest you're grabbing False Autonomy to give you a longer time before you need to cast it. This is really important as well because Dominate Mind has a 30-second cooldown, so you get a 45-second length, meaning you have more time with the mob than you need, so that if it breaks early or something happens or you dismiss it, your Dominate Mind is not on CD, and you can actually recapture the mob. In High Mythic Plus, you want to give yourself some distance from the mob. If everybody's over here fighting by the kernel, you probably want to make sure at the end of the Dominate Mind as it comes up, especially for the Berserker or the Brawler types, that you have a little bit of distance for it to cross so that you can get the Dominate Mind cast off. As far as your keybinds are concerned, you can find in action bar section here, just below interface panel, you can see here the pet action bars that you can queue up. I've set mine to, I guess, Control Z and Control X. These are the two you want bound. 3, 4, and then button 5 sometimes is relevant for the ability depending on where it is, but this will easily allow you to press and force the mob to cast it, especially if you have unticked the auto cast in order to make sure they don't cast their big AoE or their big CC or whatever it is that you would like to hold on to. I guess that's basically it. The other thing to note is you can actually heal up these mobs. So sometimes they'll get very damaged because your team will be hitting them, but you can heal them up with the chart, with the bar here. You can just mouse over macro them, or if you click to cast, you can grab them and top them off a little bit. The other thing to note for Priest, one of the relevant reasons why I started to research this is so that I could get Shadow Word Pain onto those mobs before I CC them, and then I can use the mob as a kind of place to gather Shadow Men procs or Power of the Dark Side procs, and this all works fine. So if you press Shadow Word Pain on the target and then MC them, you will farm Shadow Men procs on that target. And I know it's ticking around in the background, it's a friendly target, but it still counts toward building up Shadow Men. So one of the things you can do, especially on a single target boss, whereas Disc Priest, as Void Weaver especially, you're looking to leverage Shadow Men, but you only have a single target to deal with. Taking that mob into the fight guarantees when it pops out that you have another target for your Shadow Word Pain to tick down on and give you some of these resources. So that's an interesting piece for you to look into. I think that's all for now. Just wanted to get this video out so that as Season 1 comes up, people can look up this information and see what options are interesting and useful as they plan their routes. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. We'll see you next time.